Imagine writing letters so powerful they could outlive you by centuries. Letters that made strangers weep, pray, and question the nature of virtue itself. This is Clarissa, or The History of a Young Lady by Samuel Richardson, published in 1748, a monumental work that reshaped what a novel could be. Richardson was not a nobleman or a professor, but a London printer who quietly changed literary history. Before Clarissa, novels were often seen as light amusement. After it, the form became a vessel for human consciousness, morality, and emotion. Richardson's mastery of the epistolary form, the art of storytelling through letters, turned readers into confidants. They weren't just observing the characters, they were living alongside them, breath by breath, word by word. Critics across the centuries have called it one of the greatest achievements in English fiction. Virginia Woolf once said Richardson invented the novel of inwardness, and scholars still cite Clarissa as a foundational text for modern psychological storytelling. Although the novel was written long before literary prizes existed, its impact has been more enduring than any trophy. It shaped generations of writers, from Rousseau and Goethe to Jane Austen and Henry James, each borrowing its emotional precision and moral complexity. And perhaps the most haunting line from Clarissa's letters still echoes today. I thought that I could forgive injury, but injury upon injury, wrong upon wrong, may weary out the most forgiving temper. So, if you love stories that challenge your heart as much as your intellect, stay with me as we open Clarissa together, a story not only about virtue and love, but about the birth of the modern soul. If you enjoy this kind of deep dive into literature, remember to like this video, subscribe to Echoes of Books, and consider supporting the channel so we can keep rediscovering the voices that shaped our world of words. To understand Clarissa, we must first step into 18th century England, a world of powdered wigs, rigid manners, and moral obsession. The air smells of candle wax and ink, and every household seems to hum with the quiet tension between duty and desire. In that atmosphere lives Clarissa Harlowe, a young woman of beauty, intelligence, and grace, born into a wealthy middle-class family that dreams of rising even higher. The Harlowes have everything but social pedigree, and that missing piece drives them to madness. Their ambition becomes a kind of fever, and their daughter, Clarissa, becomes both symbol and sacrifice. She is adored for her virtue, praised for her mind, yet treated like property. Her brother, James, pompous and cruel, resents her talent and fears her influence. Her sister, Arabella, envies her beauty. Her parents, respectable yet weak, let themselves be ruled by greed and appearances. Into this moral household enters a suitor, Mr. Walini Soames, a man so dull, so cold, that he feels more like a contract than a companion. The Harlowes insist Clarissa marry him for status and security. She refuses, politely, rationally, with all the intelligence that makes her dangerous in their eyes. The family responds with emotional imprisonment, locking her in her room, denying her letters, turning love into surveillance. Then comes Robert Lovelace, brilliant, magnetic, impossible to resist. A man of charm and calculation, whose dark eyes reflect both wit and vanity. He presents himself as her savior, promising freedom from her family's tyranny. Clarissa, cornered and desperate, flees with him, believing she has chosen liberty. But liberty, as she will learn, can be another kind of cage. Lovelace is not the devil at first glance. He's eloquent, cultured, even tender. Yet everything he does serves one purpose: to dominate. What he loves is not Clarissa herself, but the power of being her downfall. His every letter is a performance, a crafted confession of passion and pride. In a world obsessed with appearances, he is its most skillful actor. The story unfolds through hundreds of letters, Clarissa to her friend Anna Howe, Lovelace to his confidant Belford, the Harlowe family among themselves. Through them, we see minds in motion, thoughts changing shape, words becoming weapons. The letters are the real battleground, each written word a plea, a lie, a spark of rebellion. When Clarissa realizes she has been deceived, it is too late. Lovelace confines her in a London lodging house disguised as a respectable inn, but in truth, it is a brothel run by the cunning Mrs. Sinclair. The household becomes a theater of deceit, servants pretending kindness, women playing roles of sympathy, all part of Lovelace's elaborate manipulation. Clarissa's dignity, however, never breaks. Even when betrayed, even when tricked and drugged, she writes. Her pen becomes her sword. She pleads for moral clarity, prays for strength, and documents her pain with precision that makes it unbearable to read and impossible to forget. The most tragic moment, the assault, arrives not as a sudden act of violence, but as the culmination of slow psychological warfare. Lovelace takes from her the only thing she could never yield, her autonomy. The scene is not described directly, but its aftermath radiates horror through her fragmented letters. And yet she does not collapse into bitterness. Instead, she retreats into an austere, almost saintly calm, seeing her suffering as purification. Lovelace, strangely, begins to unravel. His victory brings him no peace. Guilt, pride, and love tangle in him until he becomes his own punishment. Clarissa, meanwhile, grows frail but luminous. Her letters become meditations on forgiveness and the limits of endurance. She refuses food, forgives her family, and even prays for Lovelace's redemption. Her death comes not as defeat but as transcendence. Surrounded by friends, abandoned by kin, she dies in quiet composure, her final letters a blend of human sorrow and divine serenity. Lovelace will soon follow, killed in a duel, undone by the very code of honor he worshipped. In the end, the letters stop, but the silence they leave behind is thunderous. The reader feels as if they have witnessed not just a story, but a moral experiment in the anatomy of power and the endurance of the human spirit. Clarissa is not a tale of romance or revenge. It is the story of how language itself becomes the battlefield between freedom and control. And when the last letter is sealed, we realize we've been reading not about 18th century people, but about ourselves, our desire to be heard, our fear of being owned, our fragile hope that words might still save us. The architecture of emotion. When you read Clarissa, you quickly notice that it breathes differently from other novels. It doesn't gallop toward its climax, it swells, pauses, and exhales like a living mind under pressure. The whole book is made of letters, and each letter carries the pulse of its writer's heart. This is what makes it so alive. Every feeling is written in real time, without the benefit of hindsight. Richardson understood something revolutionary, that emotion doesn't arrive in declarations, but in delay. A simple day in Clarissa might span 50 pages of letters, each filled with revisions, doubts, and self-questioning. The suspense doesn't come from what happens next, but from what might be said or withheld in the next reply. That hesitation, that human pause before confession, is where the novel's electricity lies. In this slow rhythm, we feel every tremor of anxiety and hope. When Clarissa waits for an answer from her family, the gap between letters feels like an eternity. When Lovelace writes his long, swaggering accounts of manipulation, we sense the feverish delight of a man intoxicated by his own words. The reader becomes part of this emotional machinery, turning every act of reading into an act of witnessing. Richardson was a printer by trade, and you can feel his sense of structure on the page. He arranges letters the way a composer arranges notes, building crescendos through accumulation. Clarissa's tone, so calm and reasonable at the start, begins to crack around the edges as the story tightens. Lovelace's bravado grows desperate. Their correspondence becomes a duet of tension, the melody of virtue against the counterpoint of deceit. The result is an emotional architecture that feels almost musical. Each letter doesn't just tell the story, it carries the rhythm of moral time. When Clarissa's sentences lengthen and soften, you feel her inner peace returning. When Lovelace's language becomes ornate and frantic, you feel his control slipping. Even punctuation becomes expressive, semicolons like gulps of breath, dashes like hesitation before confession. And then there is the silence between letters, which might be the most powerful device of all. Those blank spaces are like emotional rests in a score. They allow the reader to imagine the pain that cannot be written. It's in those absences, those unbearable pauses, that the novel's tragedy blooms. What makes Clarissa enduring is that it transforms patience into emotion. Every page teaches us how feeling moves through time, how sorrow doesn't explode but expands, how love and terror grow through repetition. The architecture of the novel is not built from bricks of plot, but from the breathing of human thought itself. In that sense, Richardson did something extraordinary. He taught us that letters can build a cathedral of emotion. Each sentence a candle, each paragraph a prayer, each silence a shadow that gives shape to the light. Virtue, power, and control. At the heart of Clarissa lies a struggle that feels both ancient and startlingly modern. The battle between virtue and power, between moral integrity and the systems that demand submission. It begins quietly, within the walls of the Harlowe family home, where love has been replaced by ambition. Clarissa's virtue is her pride and her curse. Her family wants to sell it, Lovelace wants to conquer it, and society wants to display it. Everyone around her wants ownership of something that cannot be owned. Richardson's genius is that he shows how power hides behind politeness. The Harlowes never raise their voices. They simply close doors, intercept letters, and remind Clarissa of her duty. Their cruelty is bureaucratic. They don't burn her, they simply smother her in obedience. Her father's moral lectures, her brother's sarcasm, her mother's pained silence, they all work together to tighten the net. Virtue here becomes a weapon used against the virtuous. Lovelace, on the other hand, represents power as seduction. He doesn't command, he entices. His charm is verbal, his battlefield rhetorical. His letters are full of flourishes. "I cannot live without her light," he writes, but each phrase conceals calculation. What fascinates us is that he doesn't see himself as evil. He sees himself as the author of his own story, crafting scenes and rehearsing lines. In a way, he's a novelist inside the novel, manipulating reality to make himself its hero. Clarissa resists him not only with her will but with her words. Her letters are acts of moral defiance. When she writes, "I have but one life to lose, and virtue must be its guardian," it isn't passive resignation, it's intellectual rebellion. She claims her right to define goodness on her own terms, even if that means isolation or death. Through her, Richardson turns the word virtue from a social rule into a personal covenant. Viewed through a feminist lens, Clarissa becomes a study in gendered power. The men in the novel speak the language of ownership, father, brother, suitor, all seeking control over a woman's body and voice. Clarissa's tragedy exposes the architecture of patriarchy long before the term existed. Her letters are her last territory of freedom, and when Lovelace invades even that, the violation is complete. Yet in refusing to yield her moral autonomy, she redefines power itself, not as domination, but as endurance. From a Marxist angle, the Harlowe's obsession with marrying into aristocracy exposes how virtue itself becomes a kind of currency. Clarissa's purity is their investment, her marriage their transaction. Richardson uses this domestic tragedy to critique the moral cost of social climbing. Every polite dinner conversation in the Harlowe house is a negotiation between money and conscience, between human feeling and economic ambition. Lovelace's downfall is the inevitable end of unrestrained power. The more he tries to possess Clarissa, the more he loses himself. His eloquence, once dazzling, curdles into madness. He becomes the perfect image of toxic control, brilliant, articulate, and hollow. Clarissa's quiet virtue, by contrast, gathers a moral gravity that his arrogance cannot withstand. By the end, it's clear that Richardson isn't rewarding submission, he's exposing its cost. Virtue in Clarissa isn't about chastity, it's about the refusal to let one's soul be rewritten by others. In her suffering, Clarissa becomes the moral center of a world built on corruption. Her silence at the end is not defeat, it's the final withdrawal of consent. If Lovelace embodies the violence of control, Clarissa embodies the revolution of self-possession. Through her, Richardson proves that true virtue is not obedience to power, but resistance to it. And perhaps that is why her story still disturbs us today, because it reminds us how easily control can disguise itself as love, and how often virtue must fight just to stay alive. The birth of the inner self. To read Clarissa is to witness the birth of a new kind of human being on the page, a mind turned inward, a consciousness aware of its own depths. Before Richardson, novels often followed actions and adventures. But here, the true adventure is thought itself, the long journey through the corridors of feeling. The letters are not just messages, they are mirrors. In every reflection, Clarissa and Lovelace discover more about who they are and who they fear becoming. Clarissa's letters trace the evolution of her self-awareness. At first, she writes like a daughter of reason, careful, balanced, determined to do what is right. Her moral compass is firm, her sentences elegant, her tone measured. But as her world collapses, something extraordinary happens. Her language begins to tremble. Her thoughts become more spontaneous, more alive. She questions not only her family and society, but her own assumptions about duty and desire. Through suffering, she discovers a new form of selfhood, one that cannot be defined by external authority. It's as if we're watching the Enlightenment's ideal of reason melt into romantic introspection. Clarissa moves from I must obey to I must understand myself. Her spiritual letters toward the end of the novel read like the birth cries of modern psychology. When she writes, "My soul is my own, though my body be enslaved," we hear the first notes of an interior freedom that no social order can contain. Richardson captures this transformation with a subtle shift in tone. Early letters are structured like moral essays, full of logic and persuasion. Later letters are intimate, confessional, even fragmentary. Syntax begins to break under emotion. Sentences drift into questions, as though thought itself is being rewritten. What we are reading is not a heroine, but the invention of introspection. The first time a novel allows a character to think as deeply as a human being actually feels. Lovelace, too, undergoes a twisted form of self-discovery. His letters reveal the psychology of pride, brilliance poisoned by self-love. At times, he confesses admiration for Clarissa's strength. At others, he mocks her as a hypocrite. But beneath his performance lies a strange self-awareness. He knows he is destroying the very thing he loves, and yet he cannot stop. His wit becomes his prison. Through him, Richardson explores the darker side of self-consciousness, the awareness that understanding one's sin does not prevent it. In this interplay between Clarissa and Lovelace, the novel becomes almost metaphysical. It's not merely about two people, it's about two ways of being. Clarissa represents conscience and inward harmony. Lovelace represents will and external control. Their letters form a philosophical duel between soul and ego, faith and desire, truth and illusion. This inward turn anticipates what the 19th and 20th centuries would perfect, the psychological novel. Without Clarissa, there is no Madame Bovary, no Anna Karenina, no Portrait of a Lady, no To the Lighthouse. Richardson opened a door that allowed the private mind to become literature's central subject. But what makes this transformation so moving is that it happens through language, not revelation. Clarissa writes herself into existence. Every sentence is a declaration of being. I think. Therefore I am. I write. Therefore I endure. Her letters become her sanctuary, her therapy, her rebellion. When she loses control of her body, she turns to words, and words become her body. Even at her weakest, she asserts identity through expression. I write, though I am faint. I write, though my hand trembles. She confides. That trembling hand is the very image of the modern self, fragile, self-aware, but still writing against oblivion. In a time when women's voices were silenced by custom, Clarissa gave one a stage as grand as any man's, not by shouting, but by writing. Richardson's greatest gift was to make interiority visible. He turned the soul into narrative space, showing that the most profound journeys happen not across countries, but within the heart. And that is perhaps why Clarissa still feels radical. Because long before psychology had a name, this young woman, alone with her pen, discovered that to think deeply about one's life is already an act of freedom. Language is power, reading is judgment. In Clarissa, words do not simply describe reality, they create it. The entire story is built out of letters, which means that every emotion, every betrayal, every plea exists only through language. This makes the novel not just a tragedy of love, but a meditation on the power of words, how they can heal, manipulate, disguise, and destroy. From the first letter, we learn that to speak or write in this world is to claim territory. Clarissa writes to her friend Anna Howe in the tone of confession and reason, but always with an undertone of defense. She knows her letters might one day be used against her, and so every phrase is an act of self-preservation. Her sentences become her shelter. When she cannot move freely, she writes freely. When she cannot speak aloud, she whispers across the page. Lovelace, by contrast, weaponizes language. His letters are performances of intellect and irony, designed to charm and deceive. He writes not to communicate truth, but to manipulate perception. When he boasts to his friend Belford about Clarissa's purity, he does it in prose that gleams with false admiration. She is virtue embodied, he writes, and I am determined to conquer her in the name of love. His words turn morality into theater. He does not speak to understand, he speaks to win. What is terrifying about Lovelace is not his violence alone, but his eloquence. His mastery of tone allows him to hide cruelty beneath grace. Even when he admits guilt, his sentences seduce us. Richardson deliberately makes Lovelace charming because he wants the reader to feel the danger of language, to sense how easily beauty can disguise manipulation. Every letter in Clarissa becomes a moral act. The style itself is a measure of the soul. Clarissa's diction is plain and sincere, rooted in moral clarity. Lovelace's is ornate, slippery, full of digressions. The contrast is so stark that the reader begins to read not only for meaning, but for character. You can tell who is speaking by the rhythm of the line, by the honesty or artifice that vibrates in the words. In this way, Richardson turns the reader into a silent judge. We are not passive observers, we are jurors in a moral trial. Every time a letter changes hands, from Clarissa to Anna, from Lovelace to Belford, we are asked to weigh truth against performance. Do we believe Clarissa's version of events, or Lovelace's? Do we pity her or blame her for trusting him? The book traps us in our own moral hesitation. We become complicit in the very act of judgment it condemns. This dynamic was revolutionary. Before Clarissa, novels often told readers what to think. Richardson instead invites them to decide. The moral drama happens not only within the story, but inside the reader's conscience. The more we read, the more we recognize how language shapes our empathy, our suspicion, our understanding of justice. The ambiguity of tone becomes central to the novel's realism. When Clarissa forgives Lovelace, do we hear serenity or exhaustion? When Lovelace declares love, do we hear repentance or pride? The truth exists not in the words themselves, but in how we interpret them. And that uncertainty is precisely what gives the novel its modern edge. Richardson knew that words could outlive intention. Letters, once sent, no longer belong to their writer. They circulate, are copied, misread, weaponized. This echoes our own age, where messages travel faster than understanding, and language often acts before thought. In that sense, Clarissa anticipates the moral complexity of our digital communication, how sincerity can be edited, how truth can be distorted through tone, how every message carries the risk of misinterpretation. Even the act of reading becomes part of the story. We feel shame when we read Clarissa's most private letters, knowing we are intruding, yet unable to stop. Richardson creates this discomfort on purpose. He makes us aware that empathy itself can be voyeurism. To read a confession is to steal a piece of the soul it reveals. The book thus asks us, when does compassion become curiosity? When does witness become exploitation? By the end, the roles reverse. Clarissa, whose voice was silenced by power, gains control through writing. Lovelace, whose speech once commanded, loses meaning in the chaos of his guilt. Language, which began as his weapon, becomes his undoing. His final letters read like broken performances, too rehearsed, too hollow to convince. Clarissa's final words, by contrast, feel timeless, simple, clear, unadorned. Her voice, stripped of artifice, becomes eternal. Through her, Richardson redefines language not as conquest, but as conscience. He shows that the true strength of words lies not in persuasion, but in truth-telling, the quiet courage to name what others refuse to face. And as readers, we are left holding her letters like evidence, wondering not only what justice means in her world, but what it means in ours. Legacy and living echoes. The story of Clarissa did not end with the closing of her final letter. It continued to ripple through centuries of literature, culture, and conversation. Richardson's novel was not only read, it was lived. In the years after its publication, readers wrote back to him, some begging for a happier ending, others sending him prayers for Clarissa's soul, as if she were a real person who had died before her time. Few books have blurred the line between fiction and life so completely. Its immediate influence was enormous. Jean-Jacques Rousseau admired Clarissa so deeply that he wrote Julie, or the new Eloise in its shadow, shaping his own heroine out of Richardson's moral fire. Goethe followed with The Sorrows of Young Werther, a work that shares Clarissa's emotional precision and sense of tragic interiority. And in France, Laclose's dangerous liaisons turned Lovelace's manipulative energy into pure social cynicism, stripping away the moral frame and exposing desire as a cold game of control. In England, Jane Austen quietly borrowed Richardson's epistolary intimacy. You can see it in the private letters of Elizabeth Bennet, in the moral debates of Sense and Sensibility, in the way characters' inner thoughts clash against the decorum of their world. Henry James, D2, built on Richardson's foundation, exploring consciousness with surgical subtlety. Even Virginia Woolf, writing 2 centuries later, called Richardson the first novelist who could make us feel what thinking feels like. Beyond literature, Clarissa left its mark on moral psychology. The novel's minute study of guilt, conscience, and redemption shaped the moral imagination of the 19th century. The Victorians read it as a moral warning about female purity. The modernists saw it as a psychological labyrinth. Today, Readers recognize it as a proto-feminist tragedy, a portrait of a woman crushed between love and autonomy. But Clarissa also speaks powerfully to our digital age. In a world of constant messaging, where emotions are typed and misread every day, Richardson's letters feel eerily familiar. The 18th century post becomes our 21st century inbox. The same questions echo: what do we reveal in writing? What parts of ourselves do we edit out? When we text, confess, or share, are we communicating or performing? Modern readers and scholars have revived the novel through new lenses. Feminist critics see Clarissa as an early voice of female resistance, a woman who turns language into survival. Trauma theorists read the novel as one of the first literary depictions of psychological violation, where the body's silence and the mind's repetition mirror modern understandings of trauma. Queer scholars find in Lovelace's friendships with men a network of coded desire, suggesting that domination and attraction often share the same space. Marxist readers see the Harlowe family's obsession with wealth as a warning about the moral bankruptcy of social ambition, a message that feels painfully relevant in the age of corporate morality and influencer culture. Adaptations have kept the story alive. The BBC's 1991 miniseries presented it with stately sorrow, while modern retellings on stage and online reinterpret it through the lens of consent and power dynamics. Some experimental theater versions even stage the letters as voice messages and emails, highlighting how the boundaries between intimacy and surveillance remain as fragile now as they were in Richardson's time. Every new generation finds its own Clarissa. For some, she is a saint. For others, a victim. For others still, a symbol of the struggle to remain human in systems that demand obedience. Lovelace, too, continues to fascinate, a reminder that evil rarely appears monstrous at first glance. He is the charming manipulator, the gaslighter, the social genius who thrives on control. That complexity is why Clarissa endures. It refuses easy answers. Perhaps the most haunting legacy of all is the experience of reading it. Those who finish the novel often describe a sense of grief, as though losing a friend they had come to know through her own words. And that was Richardson's intention. He wanted readers not to consume a story, but to live within it, to feel responsible for its outcome, to question their own hearts as they turn the final page. In the end, Clarissa is less a relic of the 18th century than a mirror held up to every age that follows. Its themes, love, control, moral identity, the search for freedom, reappear in every era, wearing new clothes but carrying the same ache. In our time, when everyone writes their own life through posts, messages, and videos, Clarissa's voice feels startlingly close. She is the ancestor of all who write to understand themselves, all who resist the narratives imposed upon them. Richardson could not have known that his letters would echo across centuries, but he must have sensed their power. Through them, he gave us not just a story, but a vocabulary for inner life. He showed that words could save, that confession could heal, that silence could speak louder than noise. And that is the living echo of Clarissa. A reminder that every time we write, we are reaching for freedom. And every time we read, we are judging not only the characters, but ourselves. 3 centuries after it was written, Clarissa still breathes. Its letters may yellow with age, but the emotions inside them remain vivid. Loneliness, pride, forgiveness, terror, the trembling hope of being understood. What Samuel Richardson created was not just a moral tale, but a vast experiment in empathy, a reminder that human hearts beat in paragraphs and pauses, in hesitation and reply. What gives the novel its immortality is not its virtue, but its vulnerability. Clarissa is unforgettable not because she is perfect, but because she feels so alive in her struggle to stay pure in a world determined to corrupt her. Her story is not about chastity, but about autonomy, the right to define oneself in a society that wants to do the defining. Her quiet strength, her ability to forgive, and her insistence that conscience is the only true form of freedom make her one of the most radical heroines in literature. Loveless, her opposite and her mirror, embodies another truth: the danger of brilliance without humility, of intelligence without compassion. Through him, Richardson warns us that eloquence without conscience becomes tyranny. He shows that language, when stripped of empathy, becomes nothing more than a tool of domination. His tragedy is that he sees everything but understands nothing. Reading Clarissa today feels uncannily modern. In an era where communication defines identity, where power often hides behind charm, and where morality is constantly negotiated in public view, her letters read like warnings from another world that still looks like ours. Each line reminds us how fragile truth becomes when filtered through desire and fear, how easily control disguises itself as love. What remains is the sense of awe, the feeling that we have read something larger than ourselves. The novel does not end with justice or revenge, it ends with grace. Clarissa's forgiveness does not erase her suffering, but it transforms it into something luminous. Lovelace's downfall does not restore balance, it exposes the emptiness of pride. The real resolution happens in us, the readers, as we close the book and realize that the same forces still shape our own lives: ambition, reputation, language, love, and the eternal question of what it means to stay good in a world that rewards power. So maybe that's what Clarissa leaves us with, not an answer, but an invitation. When every story today is written in real time, when every thought becomes a post and every emotion a performance, how do we protect the sincerity of our own voices? How do we write without losing ourselves in the noise? If you found meaning in this journey through Richardson's world, I'd love to hear what you think. What does virtue mean to you today? Is it obedience, or is it the courage to resist? Share your thoughts in the comments, and let's keep the conversation alive. Thank you for spending time with me in this long letter from the past. If you enjoyed this exploration, please like the video, subscribe to Echoes of Books, and consider supporting the channel so we can keep rediscovering the stories that shape the way we think, feel, and write.